We're recording.
Test.
Okay. I haven't said it in a long time, but ready. One, two, three. Welcome to the Elmo's World Podcast. This is Elmo Odor Jr., your host, and I'm here with my friend Mark. Mark, can you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks for having me on. And I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, USA.
Awesome. Can you tell us about what you believe, what sort of ministries you're in, all of this stuff?
Sure, sure. So I tell people what I do. What I do part time first five work for Microsoft, and I am involved with several ministries in the Atlanta area. The major one I'm involved in is called Ratio Christi, and
Mm-hmm.
that's Latin for the region of Christ, and it's a campus apologetics alliance, and we work with college students, and they have chapters around the country. My role, Ratio Christi, I'm a regional director for Southeast. And so in my area, we have several campuses. And what we do in those chapters, these are all student led, by the way. Students lead these organizations, and then we just have directors to kind of help them with the organizing and also kind of the direction just to keep the organization going. And that it's all that word means defense. And in this case, defense of the Christian faith. And then also evangelism or outreach, often and I have tables and talk to students. And I've done it myself too at a number of different campuses, both spoke to student groups and then just generally talked to a lot of students just about, what they think, what they believe. Uh, just in different settings. Sometimes we're sitting outside in the sun. So, in California, they did a style where they just had a um, dropout in the student area, put snacks in the middle, and people would just have a conversation there in the noon hour. Also, sometimes at night, yeah, we put up whiteboards and try to engage people with questions. So that gives a kind of profile. Yes, so yes, I think among a lot of Christians are probably more outspoken and also, able to kind of define on my faith and in that way.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna start and say that as of this moment, I am atheist, and but back then I was very deep into Christianity, and I actually still believe that like what my belief at that point in time was genuine. Right, because a lot of Christians say that once saved, always saved. So, like, if you're not saved today, that means you were never saved back then. Like if you're a carnal Christian or backslided from the church. Uh,
Mhm.
so I think I guess like maybe we could talk about that about the Christian faith.
So how would you classify? So there's generally one way to understand atheism, hard atheism,
Hmm.
a soft atheist. So hard atheist means there is no God, and I know why. Soft atheist means there's probably no God. I mean, roughly that's
Hmm.
definition. But do you take the viewpoint that you can depend on God or God's? That your viewpoint or
Hmm. I would say I'm sort of agnostic Christian in the sense that
okay?
that I don't think there's a model of God out there that could convince me that there is one that could stand on its own and prove itself to be at least like
Okay.
yeah to have sufficient belief for me to say oh as much as I believe that the earth is a sphere and not flat, I could also believe like that God is real. There's no model out there for that's enough for me so far.
Yeah. Agnostic is the word gnosis, which means to know. And some agnostics are saying, well, I'm an agnostic because you can't know anything. And so that's kind of a hard agnosticism. It's not the agnosticism would be there's certain things you can't be sure of.
Yeah.
So how did you classify yourself? Certain things you can't be sure of, or absolutely you can't really know anything.
Well, I as for my epistemology, I recognize that there are a lot of presuppositions that we humans, we take we assume in our daily life, but we're actually very hard to absolutely prove. Like for example, the existence of other minds, and that's why like if we're talking about like absolute truth, I'm going like pure Descartes and say, like the only thing that I could truly prove and know is that, the I think therefore I am, the cogito ergo sum. So others, I just say, hey, like, is it reasonable for me to believe that other minds do exist? Because I could be inside of a mad scientist like lair and just be like, he just inputted like my whole life's memory 5 seconds ago. That could happen. We could never really have that perfect assurance. But yeah, I assume, right, in my daily life that all this is what it seems to be. So that's the sort of like agnosticism that I have.
Okay. And okay, so going back to Descartes, I think therefore I am, does it in your viewpoint require consciousness for it to be a belief or a truth? Let me separate the two. Let's separate belief from truth. When you say a truth,
Mm.
whether or not you know something, does that require, consciousness of it?
Well,
Consciousness, in other words, makes it true.
when you say consciousness, like that like a consciousness that the electricity in our brain, or like consciousness, like being conscious of something, like being aware. What do you mean?
Being real.
Okay, so being aware of something is also equivalent to not knowing something. I think, I guess, like that's how it works, right? You have to be aware of something to know it.
Right.
Is that what you're asking?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so like if, for example, and take like a baby for instance, so baby's still trying to figure out, where the are they're kind of disoriented.
Yeah.
How people are going. Uh, and go back to I think therefore I am, and I do believe there's truth in that. I don't. Okay, I'm going to give you my viewpoint on that statement. Again, I haven't had a chance to make a statement about Descartes and have not studied Descartes, but just on that sentence alone, my view would be it's not incorrect. To me, it would be incomplete.
Incomplete. What do you think is incomplete about it?
Because it depends on your, first of all, phrasing that sentence and coming to that conclusion. And so, but I feel like a person's existence is independent of a person coming to that conclusion. If, that baby would still exist. So let's say a baby exists, let's say they live for a month and for some unknown reason, they die early from some disease, very sad. But did they ever get to the point where they worked out their own existence?
Well,
And then even if you do say, I think that's who I am, exactly what is your claim?
so it's actually, the cogito ergo sum is more about like epistemology rather than ontology, because epistemology is like knowing how we know things, right? Studying the how we understand or believe things. And ontology is like studying the thing as it is, or or being. So cogito ergo sum, or I think therefore am, is mainly about what are the things that I know, that I can be sure about truly, that is real, or is true. It doesn't really ask like what exists or what I can prove to exist, but it only asks like what I prove I can know. So yeah. So for example, like, Rene Descartes, he arrived at this conclusion because he was asking himself like, hey, how do humans know things? One is, of course, empirical evidence, right? Your senses, or another form is rationality, like your reasoning, logic, stuff like that. But he arrived at the conclusion like a lot of these things can be biased or flawed or misrepresented, or and so that's why he was like asking like, what's the prime thing that we humans can be really like, the like a prime data that we could rely on. And I think that's where
Yeah,
yeah.
understood. Yeah, okay, but again, I think Descartes was coming from a stream of philosophy that established humanism. As by the way, it's a serious thing about, right? Humanism is effective since then.
Mm.
But in my worldview, there's other types of knowledge. There's the knowledge that dogs have about themselves. There's a knowledge of mammals, and and then I think there's also things that are true. Uh, that inanimate objects, but don't require that inanimate object to have a thought about itself.
Mm.
So, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I recognize your point where like something can exist even if it doesn't know anything. Like a rock, right? A rock doesn't know anything and it exists.
Doesn't know anything.
Yeah. So I recognize that, but anyway, like, so when it comes to God and like how would I be sure that God exists as much as I can see this rock and feel it? I guess there are levels for me to say like it's equivalent to like I can like, for example, if someone plays Santa Claus is real, right? But yeah, like but he only appears like Christmas midnight. You have to catch him and like really see him detect to know he is. But let's say like half of the world's children believe in the Santa Claus fairy tale, right? Like, so that's a different level of evidence that I need to actually believe that Santa Claus is real. The same way for God. It's like it's different from like,
we told the Santa Claus story when you were young.
yeah, but I never really believed it. I thought it was a Western fairy tale, like,
Okay.
yeah.
I didn't grow up. Me personally, I didn't grow up with Santa Claus. And I tell you another thing. When I was young, my parents had a viewpoint. They didn't want to read me fairy tales, like because they know they weren't true. And this is a true story. I started school, and some of the other kids were talking about these stories. I mean, and not in a way that they thought they were true, but just quoting what these fairy tales were. And my mom reminded me, I told mom, and then I started complaining to her. It's like, why are you keeping this from me? I mean, I know it's fake, but then I don't even know anything about it.
Yeah,
And I felt like there's a gap in knowledge. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
It's not because I thought it was true, but beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of entertainment filter. It's big business, Marvel, DC, Disney, Star Wars, Star Trek, you name it all. And people are entertaining themselves. One of the recent movies that just came out, I did see the first Doom.
Yeah, I love June.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah, because I really love like science fiction. Not every science fiction, but a lot of more maybe the upbeat science fiction, which a lot of it has been, kind of in the recent years. But some friends I have said, "Oh yeah, you got to go see the second one now." So
You should.
that's all. But it's entertainment, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's possible for people to separate, what was a mythology and what's a truth. But then you have to ask yourself, even in a fictional story, what truth does it convey? And can a fictional story convey a true message? Now, to me as a Christian, I'll tell you why this is important. Because some of the claims in the Bible, like from Jesus, are parables. What's called parables. They're just intended to be morality plays.
Yeah.
They're not intended to be like an actual story.
Yeah.
They're not presented as a historical fact. And yet, and again, we'll see, and I talked to the critics of the Bible, they think, well, the entire thing was a fail. But my counter is that I think the Bible makes, for example, historical claims that have proven to be true.
Yeah.
In terms of history. And there are many other similar types of books that have made historical claims that have not proved to be true. So, that's a distinguishing fact.
Okay. So,
back to go ahead.
When you were 19, you said that's when you were converted to Christianity, right? What was the turning point?
Okay, so to me, conversion actually happens over a period of time. 19 is when I affirm that that there was a real God, and I was accepting the basic fact of Christianity. And the pivotal point right then was there's a popular song, the Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," and the person I was talking to wanted me to think through, whether or not I believe that that was a true relational statement, and that's when I made a decision. What? There was a technical point that I had to research before that, and this may interest some of your listeners, and that is um, I was curious about the preservation of the Bible. In other words, it had been translated. It has been translated, in several versions. There's a lot of manuscripts out there that have been used to translate the Bible, and want to understand more about that chain of custody. There's no one that claims that we have any original copies of the Bible, and I'm talking about either Old or New Testament. But there was a claim that what we have is a faithful reproduction of all that. So anyway, I'm not going to get into all the questions I asked, but I studied that question to my satisfaction, and then I was satisfied that what you consider as the Bible is basically now I'll put this number on top of it. It's probably 99.9% correct and 100% correct on the major claims. In other words, so the major claims of the Bible, have been verified to be authoritative. So at that point, so why do I believe in Christianity? First of all, that I believe it's true. And this also has to do with, kind of the nature of evidence. Is it, so we talked earlier about a part, he's talking about a self-awareness, right, for himself.
Mm-hmm.
I think therefore I am. I think that's what I find useful in that line of thinking is that, and Elmer, I'll tell you this, and I know before the call, I was we were talking, in the preparation, and I said you're really a thoughtful person. I think you're very through. I think the human species was created to go through these thoughtful cycles, and to me, that has more to do with how we were designed rather than any argument about survival of the fittest. Like the conversation we're having right now is this essential for our physical survival? I already know. Is any team that, even as we were talking about earlier, even if you're going to invent something like Disney or Star Trek, is that really necessary for human survival? That's really pressing my.
But do you believe in evolution? Do you believe in evolution?
What I believe about evolution is microevolution. So I do believe that, species, I know you're changing the topic, but I want to get to a point. But let me answer your immediate question. That there are changes in species. I think there is an issue trying to find a common ancestor for life forms. And also, there's another logical problem, and that is where did the information come from? And this argument's made, by Stephen Munger in his book, Darwin's Doubt. So, but nevertheless, there's a lot of similarity between species. And to me, that is an evidence of design. But let me go back to my original point. What was I trying to say?
About human beings being designed to question things spiritually.
Human beings being designed. So then that, because you had asked me about my choice of Christianity. So it was not so much about a discovery about myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's my claim. I was on a journey to discover whether or not this idea of Christianity is true. And I did not believe this is a self-discovery journey. Now, why am I saying that? Because I think there are some worldviews that, kind of lean toward pantheism, that, maybe, a good view of the universe is God, or, is an emanation from God, or essentially God, and that type of thing. in which case it will make logical sense. It is more a self-discovery journey, discovering your place in a universe from which you are inseparable. However, I don't believe that's true. I believe I am separable. So going back to Descartes' idea, but the idea of an independent person is one of the main ideas, from that line of thinking, which has helped develop a lot of areas of humanities. But also this idea of individuals is consistent with the Christian worldview. It is not consistent with some other worldviews where, you cannot distinguish between lifetimes. And one example I have of that, I read Avatar. I think Avatar was a phenomenal movie. Now, I think the first time I saw it, my friends and I, we had problems getting in the regular show, so we had to see it in 3D. But he had some glasses, and the whole movie looked dark to me because he had the 3D glasses, and it was all like that. So, other than that, though, I thought it was very entertaining, and that the worldview of Avatar was about. It was not just the interdependence; it was almost like the essential interdependence of life form. I think there's an interdependence, of life, but I think it's more separable in kind of the Christian worldview than some other worldviews.
So the interdependence of individuals is what you're saying is like evidence of design.
Well, it's just evidence of individual design.
Individual design.
Because you could still have a design argument, but first of all, Avatar itself is a design argument. But the argument there is all life is like one thing, or even kind of the implication from something like Star Wars. And I know a lot of people that are reading reading too much into Star Wars, but okay. But they talk about the force, and this force, is kind of still like some sort of life force that necessarily. But here's the trick. Well, wait a minute. How could it get separated into good and bad parts? And if it really is all one thing, how is it possible, to separate those things out? That's a challenge, in that worldview. To me, that's getting into big questions about explaining. So let me get back to my original point. So my journey into Christianity fundamentally is this independent idea of Christianity true, and is this independent being of God? That's the claim of Christianity, with Jesus Christ being God. Was that true? And meaning that there was a Jesus who was not me, and yet someone who I could know, because again, in Christianity, the idea is Jesus is alive. So it is an epistemology, but it's also, I think there's an epistemology of the individual. So it's knowledge of who you are, what is this idea of Christianity, and then is this claim about an independent God.
So I've noticed that that your syllogisms for believing in Christianity sources from like the Christ first and not like natural theology like most, where most people would believe in God first and then God had to contact mankind. Which one was it? Prophet Muhammad? Was it Jesus? Was it Buddha? So you chose Jesus, and then but for you started with Jesus and then followed up with like, and this is why Jesus is why God is real.
This is why God is real. When I say about the truth of Christianity, I'm talking about the claims of the Bible.
So
That
okay,
they're true.
so it's separate for you.
So the biggest standard, yeah. So when I said Christianity was separate from, that's what I mean. But there's more than that. And again, I think does it match? So my view of truth is corresponds with reality. And again, one thing I think also it makes me a little different. I got my doctorate in industrial engineering, so I consider myself a scientist.
Yeah.
It's a science-based doctorate. I worked as a faculty member, for University of Phoenix for some years. I mentored like 7 students to their doctor of management degree, as their primary advisor. And even as early as this past year, still volunteering on doctoral committees. So I think, again, I take more of a science-based approach. When I was talking about the Bible earlier, it's not just that. I think it's also kind of, does this match, with what I understand as the nature of reality?
I see.
And I haven't gone into details on that.
But
Even they made science arguments for other people, and there's a reason why. In a minute, I'm going to put on what I call Western education. I don't know if this also suits in the Philippines. And by the way, I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but I am half Filipino.
yeah.
So the thing is, I don't know if this idea has affected all the Western education, but I think the science education is terrible. And a lot of times it's about indoctrination. It's not even teaching people how to be a scientist. How do you come to believe what you have is true? I know a lot of the science classes I took when I was in grade school necessarily has to cover a lot of terminology. I remember being in 7th grade, having to learn all the parts of the body and all that type of thing. Were we actually running experiments? No. And even when I was in biology and we were cutting open frogs, that was more of an observational type thing. And I only remember running what I would call lots of falsifiable experiments when I was in college.
Mm.
And I was taking physics at UCLA.
So
we had actual experiments where we were doing falsifiable experiments.
So were you taking the scientific approach when proving the reliability of the Bible?
Yes.
Okay.
Huh?
What about the
I forget the scholarship behind it. Go ahead.
what about the existence of God? Like natural theology. Did you take the scientific approach for that, or is it...
I think for me, I have from a young age believed in some sort of theism, that there is a higher power. Now, would I identify that? My earliest memory of having that type of viewpoint was I was like 3 years old and believing that there was a God. But would I identify at age 3 that was the God of the Bible or Jesus Christ? The answer is no. I mean, I don't think that, that idea was fully formed in my mind. Well, that's about.
Well, right now though,
Right.
how would you know for certain that God is real? Like right now, like separate from the Bible, just theism.
Yeah. So the key word is certain. And
Aren't you certain?
well, my understanding of Christianity is based on faith, and I'm going to define what I mean by faith. Faith is a promise. Faith is a promise from a person. I'm giving you a certain definition of faith. So I believe that there is a God, that there's a God who has made claims that I believe substantially to be true. And based on that evidence, that's what I'm certain about. Now, could I prove that, for example, to someone else? And I would say probably not. And the reason being that for someone to understand what I was saying, they would have to buy in, on the validity of that claim. But it is no different than, to me, that type of claim, I can say this is roughly equivalent to a contract. Like, for example, if I sign a contract, I have a contract right now on my home. I don't fully own it. And you're not party to my contract. But I have a contract with my home, and eventually we'll be paid off. And so I can tell people about that relationship I have with the bank, but they don't participate as a first person, in that relationship. So what do they think about it? I don't know. I mean, they're going to take my word that there is a contract. Yeah. But to me, it's the same type of thing. Does that promise apply for them? No.
So you're saying that
Christianity is something, and the reason I do, and let me make one more statement. I'll let you go. The reason I say that is I do like this word covenant. Covenant is like an agreement. There's an agreement between people and God and Christianity, but not just in Christianity. The same word covenant also applies to Judaism. But go ahead.
So, so this contract, right? Like it's so you're saying that you know God is certain because you've sort of experienced this personal transaction, on your own, by on your own, right? But it's unprovable to others.
It's unprovable to others from the first person viewpoint. I think I think people can understand what like the nature of the contract is. Again, like you were, let's say there was a time when I was not a home buyer, right? So I didn't know what it was like to own a home, and um, and then later on, I did understand it. That's it.
Right now, how do you prove to yourself that this transaction of yours with God is real?
How do I prove it's real? Okay,
By to yourself, to yourself. How do you
I know. So I see the evidence in things around me. I see the evidence in design. I see
design?
the evidence in nature. I see the evidence in how people react. I see the evidence in humor. And to make humor, I think there is no logical reason under metaphysical naturalism for humor, which is itself funny. Isn't that funny? That's funny. I think it's objectively funny, which also makes an objective
Interesting.
truth. In fact, you
Interesting.
know what? If this is the thing about I like about humor. If there were no objective truth, there would be no good jokes. No, because what is a bad joke? It's funny to you, but not to me. Or it's funny to me, but not to you.
I mean, there could be
Yeah, it's not even funny.
subjective humor though, right? Like people have different.
It's subjective humor. It's not funny.
But so anyway, like so design,
Yeah.
you seeing in the nature, but
Design is evidence, and since then I do have other evidences now. I mean, all the classical arguments, even though like for example the cosmological argument, I did not use that as initial evidence to come to Christianity. But later on, when I learned the cosmological argument, I go, oh, yeah, there you go, more evidence. And for example, fine tuning evidence. To me, this means something as a scientist. A lot of the research behind fine tuning has been done the last 25 years. So that is not factored in specifically to my agreement with Christianity. And consider, too, how many people have been dead. So one thing I think about, too, I think there have been people who have been Christians since the time of Jesus. How long was that? 2,000 years ago, something like that. Did they have anything to say about the cosmological argument? No. I would argue probably the moral argument in some format has been around for a long time. So the idea of why should there be an objective morality, or even possible to have among probably 14,000 people groups around the world. I don't think it's just about nation states. I mean, we probably have 200 something nation states. But even in the Philippines, how many people groups are in the Philippines? I mean, I could look it up right now. It's like, who attracts it? The Christians. One of the reasons the Christians are tracking it is there's active work to try to translate the Bible into every language in the world, and that work continues. So, working with sociologists, that are academic in nature, they're continuing to track that. But to me, also, if you look at some of the other major world faiths, again, this was compared to religion. This is not a reason I became a Christian, but I find it interesting that Hinduism only appeals to certain people groups in a disproportionate way. And even Islam also, is disproportionate. Christianity was purely multicultural. And by the way, it's an Eastern faith. It's not a Western faith. I consider myself a Western person. But what does East mean? West was Rome. East was, and guess where it came from? Asia. It didn't come from Europe. I know that. And it came from someone who was a Jew living in Asia.
But yeah, but like
as I learn more facts about, so this is when you talk to me, Now, one thing too, as a thinking person, one thing I enjoy again about even about Ratio Christie, I continue to get new ideas that people bring to me. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you this story. 2009, I honestly did not understand um, a logical reason for atheism or agnosticism. And I do have, but even today, a number of coworkers or family members who have these ideas. And that is really the reason I started looking at apologetics more seriously. It was not to become a Christian. I was already a Christian. But then, I thought, what? I need to understand more about this. That led me down a path. And then 4 years into that path, I discovered Ratio Christie and started, making friends there. But I think in general, one of the things that keeps my kind of Christianity active is, taking ideas that people present to me, thinking them through. And I think one way they're able to prove that is if somebody gives me an idea, could I explain it back to them to their satisfaction? Not through some sort of straw man or fake argument. What? You got to be true to the, claim. Anyway, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, one last question, because this was about quite a long conversation. But like, what if we close it down to like, can you tell me why you joined Ratio Christie, what it is, and what you hope to accomplish from it, and and what you personally get from it?
Okay, so at the time I joined Ratio Christie, I was teaching at University of Phoenix, and I had an interest in apologetics, as I was saying earlier. And I thought there was opportunity to do have a Ratio Christie chapter, while I was there. And I did have one. I did have a student. We had some activity for about a year inside the organization. And I think to me, too, part of the appeal about what Ratio Christie is doing is important. But I think university continues to be an important institution, not just in the United States, but around the world. It's a thought generation forum, and having been not, I didn't just go to school, I taught school. So I think, I like to have an environment where there can be a vibrant exchange of information, especially diverse opinions, and also, an environment that's open kind of to people groups and knowledge transfer.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, well, one final question, Mark. So what advice would you give me? Like, I'm still exploring. I'm not like solid. Like, this is what I believe. I'm never gonna change. Like, what would you say to me?
Well, I'm an explorer too. I think, what? I think life was made as an exploration. And again, I think, earlier on the call, I guess, our conversation, it started as, okay, two cells became one cell that started dividing. And then it was indistinguishable. Somehow, the different cells started taking on different roles. And how that's all done, that's pretty mysterious. There's a certain mystery behind that. Scientists are still unraveling that. I think there is something to discover. And that's why I believe Christian worldview, the idea of design in the universe, that I'm talking about the natural world, is a strong claim for science. That means that there's something to find. And again, I continue to be surprised at what scientists continue to find. Well, when I was in high school, the predominant thought was like, we had a big picture of the periodic table, like all those elements, and everyone thought, oh, everything's just, all the mass of the universe is just following this periodic table. That's not the thought today. Today, the thought is that periodic table only accounts for something like 23% of the universe. Most of it today is dark matter and dark energy. And these are like some of the exciting fields, I think, to think about. Where is this mass coming from? So you know what? When we talk about a discovery path, I admire what you're saying, I think anyone who really is interested in science, including myself, I mean, I continue to be on this discovery path. One of the things that's rocking the world now is this idea of AI and generative AI. Nobody thought we would have had this type of technological breakthrough this soon. And this is exactly what a lot of podcasts are talking about. And by the way, I have been in front of several Christian groups talking about artificial intelligence. And I continue to have people actually good talks. I'm going to be doing one again next month. And just listen. So when you talk about a way where discovery can continue to happen, what I'm telling you is, to me as a Christian, I still feel that I have a lot to learn. That's what I'm telling you. And I've had my college education and I've had so many things. I think this is the way we're designed as people. We're designed for all this discovery. But it builds on what you said earlier. And again, I think the product was very correct. I think it's incomplete in the sense that self-knowledge is not the only knowledge to me that's exciting. When I talk about AI, when I talk about dark matter and dark energy, I think those things are outside myself. You see what I'm saying? And now there's like millions of dollars chasing dark energy, dark matter, and actually Microsoft made like a $10 billion bet on OpenAI. And they're not the only ones that are making this level of monetary investment. Is that an investment in yourself? I don't think so. I think that what's real, if you see what culture or where the money is, they don't say this thing, follow the money. You've heard that thing, follow the money. When it's such a duty on some sort of crime, you got to follow the money trail to see, what was motivating it. If I see what's motivating nation states today, one of the things that are motivating, I'm not going to get to the negative side of things. I think there's some negative things people are pursuing. And even people would argue that you have to be cautious, like in the area of AI, right? Because I think that can go down really fast. And I agree. But I think there also can be a lot of good behind it. So I'm just telling you that that kind of spirit of adventure and discovery is awesome. I mean, but let me ask you the question: this, what type of things do you think you've discovered that have been major and significant?
For me, like, I think one sentence for me would be like, you could be convinced something is so true, even if it's not. Because I've talked to like hundreds of people, and every one of them has been convinced like this is true, what I believe is true, But like everyone's believing so many different things, But I want to like ask myself too, like, what if what I believe is wrong, And listening to everyone and seeing their perspective, like, puts everything into like this bird's eye view, like everyone believing everything, thinking they're the right one. It's
Exactly.
Yeah.
But let me add something to your story here. I have siblings who claim to be Christians too. And one of the reasons I think it is not just an abstract truth, but a personal truth, is if we were to tell our story side by side, right? And we have very similar genetics. We grew up like in the same area in Southern California and all that. Their take on what they think about Christianity is going to be slightly different from mine. Because the reason, and I'm going to give a reason behind it, because it's also, to me, a personal journey. They believe that there was a God that they interacted with that, was kind of their friend as they walk. So going back to that Lord of my shepherd idea, the idea of the Lord of my shepherd is that God is like a shepherd is to the lambs, that he takes care of them and that he protects them from danger, and that he makes things happen to the benefit of our life. And again, there's things that I believe that happened over my life. And I'll give you just one story. When I was a teenager, I had eczema really bad, and on my mom's arms, right here, a bit of the everywhere creases, she had these sags that you could see. When she was a teenager, she had eczema too. Of course, this is in fact genetic, but the skin, rash. It's not contagious. And when I was a teenager, it was really bad. My skin was breaking out. And I believe that I prayed for healing, and today there are no scars. Even right after that, the whole thing healed. And there was a big difference. You could see the difference between my skin and my mom's skin. This is to me one evidence of healing. Now, again, going back to that contract analogy, does this necessarily convince someone else? No, because they weren't that person, right? They didn't experience this. And then they still have this idea. It's like, well, how do I know that that was a miracle? So that's the type of thing where I don't want to take a personal experience and project that as evidence for another person. However, if Christianity is personal, I'm going to claim that there should be some personal evidence. That's what I'm saying.
All right.
If it is personal, if it was completely abstract, then you and I would come to the same agreement as for example, if we were studying the speed of light. I think that's an abstract truth, and it's not a personal truth, and therefore we can come to the same answer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, like, I'm agnostic, and I'm not saying like this is the truth, you know. So I can't really have a claim against your claim. So
Sure, that's
yeah.
right.
Well, I guess like we'll find out when we're dead, you know.
I have another claim too. I have a claim that Christianity is a tent where agnostics can thrive. And why? Because a claim among Christians that you know everything. The fact that the claim is that there is a God who knows everything, but that doesn't mean that you, as the person, has to know everything or understand everything. Now, that being said, I do believe we were built to know more. And my evidence is that, the human species has had a lot more advances in communication and culture making, for example, compared to other mammals. And I do believe, yes, mammals can communicate. We've seen it, even with videos, right? They communicate with gorillas or in sign language. But then, do you see gorillas making like political systems and creating cryptocurrency and AI? Like, no.
All right.
The dolphins communicate? Absolutely. I saw this. I love these videos. I mean, Facebook keep pushing. Once you see Facebook, right? Once you click a video, you keep getting more. Anyway, what I had to do with these dolphins at a dolphin park, and they put them in behind this wall. And when the people would walk up, the dolphins would identify them, and they would sip water over them, like, third sphere. They knew how far to sip the water. They're like, that's amazing, that you could have a relationship like that with an animal.
Yeah.
You have any animals?
We do. We have a lot. Anyway, Mark, it's been awesome talking to you. I think we're all going over time. And, yeah. But maybe we could do another podcast again. We could really dive into the how you discovered the reliability of the Bible, and then more into like the specific like design and nature arguments that brought you to believe in God. This is like an intro podcast. We could do.
Thanks for having me on today.
All right, thank you, Mark. Nice. Hope to have you again.